Well, Snow, ready for Christmas?
I'm ready for it to be over, MJ.
Not in the Christmas spirit this year.
I I don't know. Yeah, it's been rough. It's been long.
It's been a year.
It's been a year. Yeah, it has definitely been a year.
Yeah. Well, we're joined this week with one of Kingman's most knowledgeable residents, Cullin Patillo.
We're gonna learn stuff.
We're going to learn stuff. Learn some history. We don't need to talk about politics and shit, you know? Something about history.
I know, I don't even want to talk about politics, you know? I have been like, okay, I'm good on that subject.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How you been?
I've been pretty good. I'm enjoying the nice weather.
I know. It was like 70 degrees yesterday.
I know. I'm hoping for 75 on Christmas Day. It needs to happen to make this last summer worth it.
Last summer?
This last summer.
Yeah.
The heat.
It was rough.
It was.
Yeah.
Well,
Summer was rough.
I sit in an air-conditioned office. What do I know? Yeah, so the subject we're going to talk about, Kingman, we're about 90 miles south of Las Vegas on it. And back in the 50s, they used to do nuclear testing not too far from here. Correct.
That's correct. The testing, most of it took place at the Mercury testing site, which if you're familiar with the geography of Nevada, you approach Las Vegas, or geography of Las Vegas, I should say. You approach Las Vegas on the 515. If you drive through Las Vegas on the 515 and just stay on it, it eventually becomes 95 North and you pass right by the area they did the testing.
Okay.
And that is about 120 miles straight line distance from Kingman.
Okay. And so that was really close to Las Vegas then.
It was. You could actually see the mushroom clouds from the Strip. I've seen some pictures of like window washers on some of the 1950s and 60s hotels down there. There's a real famous picture. I don't know who took it, and I can't even recall where I saw it exactly, but I think it may have actually been in Life magazine. A picture that I want to say it was a window washer or a tourist on one of the upper levels of the hotels took a picture right down the Strip, and at the very end you see this little flaming mushroom cloud, and it's a real picture from the air from that time. There's no Photoshop, as far as I know, that's happened to it, and I've seen it from more than one source.
So back at the time, though, didn't they have the knowledge that the fallout from that would drift away from that area?
I'm sure they did, because they put out detectors, radiation detectors in Mojave County. They put them all over the West. What my understanding of what these detectors were is, in its most simplest form, you can think of waving a piece of Scotch tape in the wind. The sticky side picks up particulates. It's probably a little more complex than that, and I think there was some sort of photographic exposure that happened where you could develop something and count the traces of radioactive particles and everything else. But the state of the art at the time, which was not very, very high, that was the detectors they put out, at least en masse. And that was what they put in places like Mojave County, Yavapai County, Gila County, Coconino County, other places in the West as well. And what these readings gave you is they gave you a very crude radiation reading that is very hard to say that the radiation Kingman received back then would be equivalent to what we would measure a dose of radiation. The units just don't add up. It's hard to say that this amount of radiation in 1962 is this amount of radiation using our current state-of-the-art measurement capabilities. But what you can say is when I look at a measurement in this area from that time using those crude detectors, and another measurement taken at a similar time during the same round of testing in some place like Gila County, the measurements taken in Kingman and the measurements in Gila County are relatively, can be compared relative to each other. Maybe not relative to what we would measure now. And what those measurements show is that Kingman received twice as much radiation as Gila County. Yet, if you were in Gila County back then, and you got a myriad of what they call compensable primary cancers, and you can prove that you were in Gila County and you've got the proper cancer diagnosis and medical records, you qualify for coverage under the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, whereas somebody here in Kingman does not.
What?
Because southern Mojave County is not covered by the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Only areas of Mojave County north of the Grand Canyon.
Why would that be? Do you know?
I've heard of a myriad of theories.
Especially like Gila County. My mom lives in Gila County part of the year too. I'm like, that's like 3.5 hours away from us.
Yeah, for
like,
it's clear on the other side of the state from Kingman.
Right.
It's also much more in southern Arizona. We're clearly in northern Arizona. The reason it didn't happen, I mean, I've heard a variety of arguments. Our ex-mayor and Raquel and my our old middle school principal, Wes Byram, swore that he had seen a letter from some government agency somewhere back during his first term as mayor, where they said, "Oh, somebody spelled Mojave with a J, and they thought it was in California, so they didn't include it." Okay. I don't believe that. I'm sure there was a letter of something floating around. I don't think it said that. I don't believe it's an urban legend. I try and cut that argument off whenever I hear people say it, because one, it's not going to help us. Two, I've never ever seen any evidence that was true. I think the best explanation I heard was from an attorney that's a friend of mine in Prescott, and her thoughts are, well, if you look, Kingman just was not well represented by our congressional delegation back in 1990 when the initial round of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was passed. It just was not seen by our urban delegation to Congress, mainly people from, I'd have to look up who our representatives were at the time, but I think was it Bob Stump and some other people, some bigger names in politics in Arizona. It just wasn't, they didn't see that as an issue here. It wasn't brought to their forefront, so they didn't push it, and we didn't get covered. Now, we were excluded from that legislation altogether in 1990. In 2000, they realized their mistake. They were supposed to cover all of Mojave County, and politics, as it usually is, we got, pardon my language, we got screwed again. They did manage to get the northern part of Mojave County covered under the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act in 2000. And so if you are
Colorado City,
but it's really much closer than you think. You take off from Kingman Airport, you get up high enough, the first thing you see is the Grand Canyon. Literally, you can still look down and see the city limits of Kingman. The Grand Canyon is right over there. There are places where you can be in the southern part of Mojave County, and 5 miles away is on the other side of the Grand Canyon. If you lived on one side, you're covered. If you lived on the other side, you're not. And there was absolutely there's no possible way there could be any distinguishable difference in the radiation exposure between those areas. Another glaring situation like that is for the Wallapai people. They have portions of the reservation that are literally, stone's throw away from Peach Springs, where very few people lived, and they've developed compensable cancers, and they're covered because Coconino County is covered. That part of Mojave County is not.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
Why didn't somebody call Aaron Brockovich? It sounds like.
Well, the United States.
It sounds a lot like that story.
Because they're not a public corporation, the United States government has sovereign immunity against lawsuits. That's why you have these acts like the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, which is just a little. It's just a little pain. It's not very much for what you've gone through. I mean, it's killed people, and I think if you die, they give you $100,000. If you have a compensable cancer, it's $50,000. If you're a uranium worker, it's so much. But you've got to meet their criteria. Now, that's if they pass the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act again, because it did expire in June. And under the Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
The
one that's not like me.
The
one that's not you.
The Speaker of the House.
Yeah. he has actively fought and fought and fought against this legislation for some reason. He literally has destroyed it every step of the way. Josh Hawley, of all people, and I know he's not popular on all fronts, but on this one issue, he's very popular with me. He has taken the bull by the horns, and he is fighting for this issue.
But because of what's happening in his
Because of what's
state.
happening in his state.
What happened in his state?
That's true. What happened in his state, they basically had a lot of the, my understanding is a lot of the development process for our nuclear weapons industry took place in his state. A lot of the early development produced a lot of nasty byproducts and waste. And they did things like bury it in unlined public landfills. And it's still there. And there are things like high schools built across the street from these sites now. And so Missouri is just awash in radiation in these areas because of it. And so he's not taking no for an answer. And it passes overwhelmingly no matter what's proposed in the Senate. The Senate is clearly on board. But again, there's some political shenanigans going on because previously, and you're not going to believe this, but Senators Lee and Romney start playing politics, and they usually, I don't know how much they have had to influence the decisions that Mike Johnson or Speaker Johnson has made, but they have been vehemently against this for some reason, and it benefits their own state.
Right, because Utah's right there.
Yeah,
It's right there. Utah. The most recent legislation that I'm aware of that they've tried to get passed is what this isn't his official name, but we call it. It's the Crapo-Lujan bill. Senator Crapo, a Republican from. I hope I'm saying his name right. I'm probably not. It's probably Crapo, isn't it?
Huh.
But Senator from Idaho, let's call him, is a Republican, and Senator Lujan from New Mexico wrote a very comprehensive extension bill to the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act in 2015. And that bill did things like bring in southern Mojave County, cover other parts of Arizona, cover neglected parts of Nevada, because believe it or not, Clark County is not covered. Cover parts of cover. I think it would have covered the entire state of Utah, the entire state of Arizona, state of Idaho, several places in the Pacific, the Trinity Downwinders in New Mexico specifically.
So Las Vegas wasn't covered, even though it was 30 miles away.
Yeah, no, Las Vegas wasn't covered. If you lived in Las Vegas in 1958 and they tested a nuclear bomb and you died of one of the listed primary, and we're talking nothing that's strange, we're talking like specific types of breast cancer that happen in the populace, but happen at much lower rates than they do in the populations that were exposed to radiation as children like this. But if you had one of those and you lived there back in Las Vegas then, and you've got one of those now, you're not covered. You never have been.
That's amazing.
They're playing politics.
How many years did they do nuclear testing there?
The above ground testing took place it was about 10 years, 1952 to 1962. It was in excess of 100 nuclear detonations that bathed the entire West in radiation, and the entire West very close to the test site like we are in very large amounts of radiation. And in 1962 was the last one. It was supposed to be, some people will tell you it ended in 59, but they changed that to 62 because they had switched to below ground testing by then. They weren't very good at it, and one of their below ground tests converted to an above ground test, let's say. Their little dome and structure for their underground explosion was not that competent and collapsed in, and it exploded outwards and created the same problem as if it would have been an above ground test.
All right, so 10 years of this, but it still took them almost 30 years.
Yeah, they didn't have any type of coverage until 1990.
And do you happen to know what the rates of cancer were? How it
I can
went
only talk
in that case?
Specifics, no, but I can certainly talk anecdotally about that. I don't have the figures right here in front of me, but there's some extensive reports that show that there was an increase. The previous Arizona Radiation Regulatory Authority director, Dr. Aubrey Godwin, who I don't believe he's alive anymore, but he might be. The last time I spoke to him, that was about 20 years ago, and he was pretty old then. He agreed that there was no possible way that at least Kingman couldn't have been very, very exposed. But
Was that?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
I
get off on these sidetracks.
No, you said they must have realized that the cancer rates were rising.
Right. And they did.
Problem.
And here's well, and Dr. Godwin thought that was definitely an issue with Mojave County, and as did our most previous health department director. I forget her name, from Mojave County.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
But anyway, on top of that, a very good friend of my family was Dr. Arthur A. Arnold, and he to those of us who grew up here in Kingman, he was the administrator of the hospital when we were kids, but he was the doctor that was brought to work here in Kingman back in the 30s. And he was the quintessential small town doctor for all of us growing up. And one of the things that he noticed and that he started ringing the alarm bells was in the 1960s. He was having, cases or a prevalence of childhood leukemia, which is the first round of cancers you get from testing like that. It affects kids. He was seeing rates of childhood leukemia that were 40 times what they should have been. You had a population of 5,000 people and you had 40 kids with leukemia. It just doesn't happen for no reason.
Wow.
And so, anecdotally, as a layman, I can say that's one statistics I'm very confident in. Other than that, everyone that I know of my parents' generation seems to have. And I realize cancer, the older you get, the more prevalent cancer becomes, but an inordinate amount of cancer. And I'll just use my dad as an example. He luckily fought and beat cancer for 30 years, but he had 3 of what they call primary cancers. Each one of them qualified him for compensation. And they're not, I want to say they're run-of-the-mill cancers, and they're not. Like one of the cancers that they cover is miscellaneous bladder cancers. So any bladder cancer, they would cover you. The particular one that my dad had was particularly nasty and aggressive, and the Mayo Clinic had only ever seen one other tumor like that. And they believed it was probably out of radiation worker of some kind. They didn't have some specifics on it when they did his pathology. But then he got, liver cancer, and he got colon. Each one of those is a different primary cancer that the government, there's no way to tell whether that the radiation caused it or not, other than it caused an uptick in the rates of cancer. Therefore, the government was at fault, and the way the Radiation Exposure Act is written is they won't go ahead and assume liability for anybody that gets that in that area that can prove that they were there at the time.
But $100,000 is no way compensation for 30 years of medical bills.
Oh, it's not even close. It's
especially not cancer bills.
We're talking. My dad alone was $1 million plus, probably $2 million plus if we added it all up. And granted, luckily he was insured, but that was something they paid for. It wasn't free. So that $2 million was $2 million that could have been spent on other health issues he might have had further down the line if he'd lived longer. Everybody says, oh, your dad died at 83. He got to live a long and healthy life. And he did live a long life. The last 30 years were far from healthy. He didn't let it get him down or stop him, but it was far from healthy. He had some significant struggles in those last 30 years. And on top of that, his parents were both almost 100 when they died. So really, did he get robbed of 10 years worth of life at least? Maybe 15? I don't know.
Was your dad, while he was alive, was he like trying to fight the government on this issue?
Absolutely. My dad and Donnell Stevens, both of whom have passed away, formed the Mojave County Downwinders Incorporated, which was a 501c3, which they did have some luck using that as kind of a, they needed a place to put in, people wanted to donate money back then. It's like, okay, well, what do we do with this money? It's not my money. I've got to use it for what it's been donated for. They had to have a way to do it. So they formed the nonprofit, which is now dormant, by the way. It's dormant. Technically, we could reactivate it if we needed it, but there's no money left to do anything with. So there was no reason to continue it and do the reporting. But he fought for, since the early 90s. And after he had his first diagnosis in 1997 he had stage 4 metastatic bladder cancer. Or is that metastatic or metastatic? I always get confused.
I think it's metastatic.
I think it's metastatic as well, but I've heard doctors call it metastatic, so I don't know that I know the difference. But anyway, the kind that had spread, and it was stage 4. He really kind of started to take notice of this, and that's when the Mayo Clinic actually diagnosed him with a very rare tumor. They don't know really. They don't generally see it in the bladder. It was that strange. And I'm not a medical professional, so I don't know more about it than that.
So are there people today who are still getting cancers? Even like younger folks getting it?
I think if they truly knew the effects of radiation exposure and its full fate and transport in the environment of Kingman in Mojave County, the answer would be yes. I don't have any evidence other than my own, I have a modicum of scientific knowledge about it and my own observations. One of the things that I've noticed, a lot of people with thyroid problems, I'm one of them. I've got a little scar right here. I had 60% of my thyroid removed in 1995 when I was 24 years old. Because they thought it was thyroid cancer. They couldn't biopsy it. It was in the back of my thyroid, so they said it has to come out, and they went in and took it out. I know a lot of people with thyroid issues around my age, around Raquel's age. Generation X, kind of, I would say mid-40s to 60, that grew up here in Kingman. And one of the things that I've been told is that potentially one of the places that we got our grade school milk from were dairies in Mesquite, Nevada, because Mesquite, Nevada is a nice, bustling community now. Back then, it was a small farming community on the Virgin River in Nevada. Wasn't much there, and there was a lot of dairies, I understood. And if you know a little bit about how radiation travels in the food chain, it takes about 10 years for it to concentrate in dairy products. So Mesquite, Nevada is one of the heaviestly irradiated places outside of the test site in the country. There's been some arguments that one of the kids that died of childhood leukemia back in the 60s had to go back and forth to Cedar City, between Kingman and Cedar City a lot, and because he had to go through that area, died because of his exposure to radiation. It's also the area where they filmed a lot of John Wayne movies, and I forget which John Wayne movie it was, but there was a John Wayne movie where a majority of the crew eventually got lung cancer and died.
Oh my God.
Including John Wayne, by the way.
Right, that's what I thought John Wayne died of, too. Yeah.
That was stomach cancer, wasn't it?
Well, he died. I don't know what he died of, but a lot of them got cancer and died. I do know that. There was some.
I thought he was lung cancer too, but
I'd heard it was lung cancer. But
okay, well,
I don't know.
But the grade schools in Kingman, 10 years after the last, 10-ish years. I mean, this would have been, I think the first grade school lunch I would have been in 1976. 76? When did we start kindergarten? 75 or 76? Yeah. 1976. And if Mesquite, Nevada was heavily radiated in 1962 and before that, and they did things like grow their own alfalfa to feed the cows that they used in their dairy farms there, it would slowly and gradually concentrate in dairy products and lead to a potential contaminated milk product. I don't know whether that was paid any attention to back then or not. And I'm certainly not accusing our school of anything, or the district or anybody else, but it's just speculation on my part at this point, kind of do two and two equal 4? And
no, because you simply don't know.
You don't know. But, so there's a lot of that going on. And then I spoke at a conference in September of radiation researchers. And these are people that are way smarter than me. They know a lot about physics and the way in medicine. There are a lot of doctors there as well. And one of the new areas of research and radiation exposure are autoimmune diseases. apparently autoimmune disease can be a symptom of exposure to radiation, they think. I know a lot of people with weird autoimmune diseases, whether that's a fibromyalgia or lupus or some other thing like that. I've known, a dozen at least, maybe more.
At least that. And on top of that, I mean, what are the amount of people that you have known personally of your dad's era who have died of cancer in this town? It's
dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and they all die of cancer. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them do. And it's always something weird.
Now, a big proponent of this cause, and not exactly our favorite person, is Paul Gosar.
Yes. Paul Gosar, I on a personal level, Paul Gosar is a very nice man to go talk to. He has done nothing but help us on this cause. He's helping behind the scenes right now because under the Biden administration, he kind of took a step back and let Arizona's Democratic congressional delegation take the ball and run with it and push it as much as they could for the state of Arizona. But he has been helping out, and he's been a previous sponsor of original legislation to get Mojave County covered. And so on this one issue, he's spot on and is trying to help us.
That's good that he has some decency.
No, you gotta give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, and Paul, I got to tell you, Josh Hawley has gotten this issue further than anybody ever since it was initially passed in 1990. Up until him, the best had ever been done, because every time our delegates to Congress and the House of Representatives or the Senate, they would sign on to, we're going to sponsor a bill for you guys this year. We're going to sponsor, and that was it. They just put it out there. If it went on, took off, it took off. If it didn't, it didn't. You've got to have people pushing legislation in Congress. A lot of things that people don't realize is just because, the senator from Arizona proposes a bill doesn't mean it gets voted on. Greg Stanton, the ex-mayor of Phoenix and a representative for another district in Arizona, and he's a Democrat, was the very first one to get a bill heard in committee, which all bills in Congress, before they make a vote of everyone in Congress, they've got to come out of committee. The committee has to say, yes, this is a bill worth considering, and they put it through the judicial committee. And they actually had a hearing on that. And that was the only reason they did that is because of all the groundwork that Paul Gosar did with his, he had field hearings here in 2014, 2015, somewhere around there, and actually had people testify. So they had that testimony of record. Then they had, whatever happens in the judicial committee in the Senate, or maybe it was the House of Representatives, I forget which one it was. But they heard it, they put it out, past committee, and went out to the Committee of the Whole, which is all of Congress, or all the voting body, whether that's the House of Representatives or the Senate, I don't remember. I think it was the House of Representatives that was pushing it back then. And then it just languished there. You've got to get the chairman or the majority leader to agendize it for a vote. And that's our sticking point right now.
That's where Johnson comes in.
Yeah. Majority Leader Johnson refuses. And, he is playing politics. I can't say that loud and clear enough. No matter what your political views. He is playing politics. He doesn't, there was no reason that it should have been, there was a compromise piece of legislation that finally had Senators Lee and Romney signing on to from Utah that was added to the continuing resolution last week. Mike Jordan pulled it. And he's pulled it every single time. I don't know if he's playing politics because he thinks, this will just be a thing that can be touted as a win for the current administration and he's beholden to Donald Trump or what. But, it's disgusting politics. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing it for over 20 years now, and we're sick and tired of it. And, the point of the matter is this. And I'll just tell you this from my personal point of view. And this is just my opinion and my words, and I'm responsible for them. But the United States government exposed my father as a child to lots and lots of radiation. Turns out it was deadly radiation. He spent the last 30 years of his life being tortured with cancer treatments. I can't tell you how many times we went back and forth to the Mayo Clinic. So many times, at least at least a couple hundred over 30 years, maybe more. He flew down there, had to be aerovac down there multiple times via airplane and helicopter. As far as I'm concerned, it was just a slow murder that started in 1952 when he was a little kid. And it's about time they own up to it and admit what they did. I think they have more sinister motives back then than they're living up to. Otherwise, we would have been covered by now. I don't know why. They knew people were here then. They just knew it wasn't a lot. They knew radiation was deadly. They didn't know quite how deadly, but they knew it was deadly.
Collateral damage.
Yeah. So, okay, you've done that. Own up to it. Admit it. And make us eligible for the same type of coverage everyone else is in a similar situation in places that didn't get irradiated as much as Kingman and southern Mojave County.
But, yeah, I mean, they just don't want to pay for that. Like that.
It's worse. It's worse than that. It's not even that they don't want to pay for it. There's so. Let's go back to you heard the Senator Crapo and Senator Lujan bill, the omnibus bill that Hawley proposed and got passed. He basically took their bill and said, okay, I'm going to propose this bill you wrote in 2015. That didn't have a cap, and they put it through a budgetary cap. They put that through the Congressional Budget Office analysis that they do for all legislation. And I think that the Congressional Budget Office produced a very flawed analysis and said it was going to be a $100 billion compensation package, blah, 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 blah. Well, if they'd have looked at the current payouts have been I'm going to say low, but I believe it's in the very low billions. So not a lot for what they did. And it's over the course of 40 years now that they've paid that out. So it's a drop in the bucket. The two versions of the bill that have been batted around recently have had caps of okay, if this costs more than, I think the latest one was $10 billion, Congress has to revisit funding. So there's just not an open-ended compensation paycheck or check there. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but it's not about the money. So you've got somebody saying it's going to cost $100 billion, which I don't think it would. I think that would have been less than 20. But that's another argument there. Then you've got two proposed bills. One's a $5 billion cap. One's a $10 billion cap. Neither of those are acceptable either. So I just don't see the argument about money, and it's not a lot of money on an individual basis for anybody, because you need to understand that these people have either been given a fatal illness that they have to live with the rest of their life, a cancer diagnosis, or they've been killed by cancer. One of the two. And it's through no fault of their own. So I just see this whole argument as a disgusting exercise in modern United States government politics, and it's sickening.
Well, the government never admits when they're wrong.
They don't.
They can come out and say, hey, we didn't research this enough. We didn't realize the effect that this would have on downwinders.
They're liars.
Yeah.
How come the insurance companies, though, who would have to cover your dad for 30 years, why wouldn't the insurance companies be on board hey, we want the government to recompensate us for these?
I don't know. I don't know that this really has made the radar of most insurance companies with the way that health insurance works nowadays. Nowadays, you've got the enrollment periods for group health anyway, and everybody wants group health because it ostensibly is cheaper and spreads out the risk better. And I just don't think that comes into their calculus. It's just figured in with the we've got a pool of these people that have this group health insurance policy, and here are the risk factors based on age, and those risk factors are already baked into the statistics and that the actuaries use to decide.
Was there any of that fighting with the insurance companies with your dad?
Yeah, but it was normal stuff you'd fight with insurance companies over when somebody gets sick. It wasn't anything. There wasn't anything saying, no, we're not going to cover him because of his exposure. It was like, well, he has group health insurance cover him. And they did. And thank goodness they did, because I think, without that, he wouldn't have been able to go to the Mayo Clinic, and he wouldn't have survived his first cancer in 1997.
Yeah, which would make the situation even worse if they were fighting you every step of the way.
Oh, yeah, it would have made it impossible.
God. We all know how that turns out with insurance companies lately.
We do, don't we?
We do know. I'm torn on that one. Like the Luigi, it's kind of a thing like, well, I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. But I kind of understand.
I understand as well. I saw the meme that I think best describes me. It's not that people are advocating murder, but they're denying sympathy because it's out of their network.
Yeah.
Well, and it's almost like I was thinking about this. I go, is this the start of the poor having enough of just what our country's turning into? It's just it's
just turned into a corporation for profit.
Right. And it's disgusting. I mean, how much do average people have to lose and lose and lose before they're like, I'm not going to take it anymore? Like it, I mean, and then once it gets to that point, they get desperate, like this guy's act. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and yes, it was wrong what he did, but
I think a lot of people are finding like Bernie Sanders was right.
They should have listened. They should have listened long ago to Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, this is a whole nother long conversation but medical.
I don't know why I didn't get the
profit.
same impression that I got from Bernie Sanders. It was like, I thought whenever Bernie Sanders got, I'm like, this guy works in here. He's one that's telling the truth. He's basically a whistleblower. He's telling you what they're doing. Yeah. Listen,
I mean, what does a normal person have to do, though? You have the government fighting you on one end. You have the insurance companies fighting you on the other end. And, God, no wonder what happened.
I know. It's like, it wasn't really a shock when it happened. It was like, well, you can't do that. But it wasn't something that I found extremely shocking.
And what was a weird thing about that is we're all so polarized that I think almost everyone agreed, this is messed up. And we understand.
Yeah. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
All right, well, Cullin, thank you for the history lesson. Where do you go from here on this?
We were hoping that there would be something in some sort of continuing resolution from Congress this year to at least extend RECA beyond its expiration date in June and expand some of the area. That's not happening. Right now, we have come out, and I say we, meaning Mojave County Downwinders Incorporated, such that it is. It still is a viable corporation, but it really is very, very dormant now. It's I'm one of the officers, and my friend Matthew Capalbi in Tucson's the other. And the Union of Concerned Scientists and the miscellaneous downwinder groups from all across the nation and the South Pacific are pushing for a revised bill with an expanded coverage area, and quite honestly, an expansion in compensation as well, with or without a budgetary cap. I think there is plenty of hope for this next congressional season, whenever the next Congress starts up. And I'm hanging my hope on Josh Hawley and his continued fight. I mean, he came out of the blue with this. Missouri wasn't under my radar as a potentially exposed area because for the longest time we had fought an insulated battle of get Southern Mojave County covered, get Southern Mojave County covered, get Southern Mojave County covered. Then, a little bit with Senator Lujan and Orrin Hatch in Utah and Senator Crapo in Idaho started to change that about the mid-2010s with the proposed bills that would cover much more and with much broader and fairer coverage. So I'm hoping something like that comes because we're now fighting more as a whole. The Union of Concerned Scientists is kind of our ad hoc lobbyist in this drive right now, and with them, the support we're getting from Senator Hawley and the Senate as a whole, I might mind you, because it's always passed that with recently overwhelmingly through the Senate without any problems. They're usually the ones that have been initiating the legislation recently, Senator Hawley specifically. I'm hoping that something can get passed. And at a minimum, I would hope that it would be something that gave a broader area coverage in areas that are compensatable and at least extended existing monetary payouts.
Yeah. And Gosar is a big Trump ally, so maybe he could get Trump's ear.
Maybe he might. He might, and he has. I've spoken to his office staff quite a bit. I'll just admit that I was a fairly dyed-in-the-wool lifelong Republican. Never thought I would ever change my political stance on my political party ever. Then I saw what happened after this country did what they did, and God forbid elected a black man. And I just I didn't like that, but I kind of stuck around because I was interested in our local guys, and I knew they weren't like that. Well, I was hoping they weren't like that. And then then the election of 2016 happened, and I'm like, well, I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of these people. I'm not like them. And so I'm definitely an independent. I've always had a progressive swing, and which shouldn't have anything to do with this issue, by the way. I see this as a very nonpartisan issue. But I like to think that Arizona can be more independent than it's been recently. So let's hope.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be interesting next 4 years. See what happens.
It will.
And hey.
And I'm hoping that we can leverage the fact that Paul Gosar is a really great ally with President Trump. I mean, I honestly hope President Trump does a great job as a good president.
Yeah, well, I don't think any of us are rooting for him to.
I'm not.
Do what he might be to say he does.
Yeah.
Right.
Do some of the hard things, and actually be presidential about it.
Right. Oh, and that goes to all of government, though.
It does.
Is like the whole budget deal this week, you guys have had months to do it. Just work together, compromise, and just pass it. Well, it shouldn't come down to a last-minute thing every time.
This sounds like a terrible thing, and this is like, a libertarian's wet dream, but I keep hoping that we get a balanced budget constitutional amendment. It would be really, really, really hard to live up to. But once we did, it would be fine. Well, I think. I would hope.
Well, hey, maybe that'll be our quick Christmas wish this year. Highly unlikely. It'd be like waiting for Santa Claus, but
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
I was happy to be here.
We learned a lot.
Yeah, I knew nothing about
Yeah.
the topic.
Well, the school that all the kids went to, it's right there, right out your front door.
Hello, Kirsty.
They watched some of the. You will hear people say, "Oh, I saw these clouds." I don't think they saw mushroom clouds in Kingman. You'll hear some of the older people say they have. I don't think they did. I don't think it's possible to have seen them from here. I think it's possible if you were at the very top of the Wallapies and knew when the bomb was going off, you could have seen something. I don't think you'd see it down here. I don't think you'd see it from the top of this bluff. I don't think you would have seen it from the playground at Palo Christi. I do think you could have seen a flash, and I've actually seen a picture that is hard to determine whether it's authentic or not. It's an authentically old picture, and it's a picture of the horizon glowing down at Davis Camp. And it's in black and white. And they said it's from the bomb blast around the state. I'm like, well, yeah, it could have been.
Well, no, I mean that's plausible because you can see light pollution from Vegas.
You
at
can.
night, so
You can. I was shocked the first time I realized that we had light pollution from Vegas when I was a kid.
yeah.
I just thought every place had a glowing horizon.
Well, that's what I thought when I moved here. I'm like, why is the horizon always so bright? Then it struck me. I'm like, oh, that's Vegas.
That's Las Vegas. And we have tremendous clarity of the air sometimes out west.
We didn't really get that. I come from the Boston area, so didn't really have that.
No.
So, all right, Cullin. Well, thank you
You're
again,
welcome.
and if you want to come on again sometime
Absolutely.
on our, I don't know,
Reality redemption.
You can teach us more about whatever. We'll think of something.
I've got lots to talk about.
I mean, because we don't want to just complain about politics for the next 4 years.
No.
We got to talk about this stuff.
There's lots of other things to talk about.
Yeah. Believe me. I don't think anybody at this table has a shortage of things to say. Y'all. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everybody. And I know this wasn't really a peppy holiday spirit episode, but, gotta learn something.
Right?
Right?
Happy holidays, y'all.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.